All right, it looks like we're live. So this will be the first GlockGuru podcast. This will be our inaugural podcast. We have a outlay of certain topics and segments. Hopefully, you find them interesting. This will be a bi-weekly podcast. So check back on Stitcher and iTunes and also gunchannels.com. At least every 2 weeks for something fresh. Hopefully we can do it more often, but for sure every 2 weeks. So this is sponsored by gunchannels.com. Go ahead and check them out. Everything that you see for the most part there is free if you want to participate. It's only $1 a month, so feel free to join us. Check out the live events tab every night. There's at least a live chat or two going on. And if you want to participate in the actual chat room, again, it's only $1 a month. So that's one sponsor this evening. I know another sponsor that we have is also a guest, and that's Gun Websites. I know he has a pretty popular YouTube page out there and a couple other actual websites. So if you'd like to introduce yourself and what you'd like to sponsor this evening, I'm all for it.
Right on. Thanks for having us. Well, me, I guess. Well, I'm running for Homecoming King, so I'd like everybody to consider me when you're voting in cafeteria during next week.
Right on. The other guest we have tonight is Stone Guy 223 from certain YouTube internet fame of UN trucks.
Yeah, right. Hey, I appreciate the invite. I'll be a non-monetary sponsor. Be like what do they call that?
Just give a shout out to some store that you support or that you recommend for people in your area to go to. You know, they don't have to give us money. We just want to share the love.
Right on. Well, I recommend everybody join the GSSF Foundation.
Awesome. Well, there's a good sponsor for the first show. Good idea.
Yeah, even better.
I vote for them for Homecoming King, so there you go.
So for those who don't know, look up gssf.org. That's Glock Shooting Sports Foundation. I'm sure we'll have a spotlight on them in the future show. All right, so just some topics we're going to cover this evening. We're going to look at what's in the news as far as Glock's concerned. And then we're going to talk with our guests and see why they choose Glock. And then we're going to go into a Glock versus segment. We're going to take a look at the model of the week for the newest Glocks and also a deal of the week. We'll look at some of the chats from gunchannels.com and take a look at a website spotlight, something that you would normally see that's Glock related for the week. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. We've got G-Webs from gunchannels.com. We've got Stone Guy 223 as our guest this evening. And I guess we'll, like I said, just really hop right into it. We were kind of talking in a pre-chat. I know I wasn't really the biggest Glock fan starting out, mainly because everyone else was, so I knew there was something better out there. But so to open it up, I'd ask each of you, why do you choose Glock? What made you switch over to it? What's your history to get on board there? G-Webs?
Oh, I can remember Glocks being in magazines for a bit, and then nobody really liked them because they were 9mm, and we all shot 45 or 38 back in those days, for the most part, and it wasn't like people were carrying very much back then either. So it was mostly what you enjoyed shooting at the range, right? So having a firearm that you could carry every day sounded great in theory, but since you weren't carrying it every day, who cares when you're taking it to the range? The trigger and the accuracy and the overall, I guess I want to say quality, but just the materials, I guess. We were all kind of biased because every gun had always been made out of metal and wood. And then a little bit of plastic on grips and stuff was showing up, but that was always considered like the all-weather cheap variety to wood. You'd get a nice classy wood set of grips for 1911, right? And then, they made a plastic version, but that was if you, for some reason, had to take it out in the weather. So I remember they were around for a bit, and I didn't like them. And I didn't get my first one until into the 90s for sure, probably about 95 or 6, maybe later than that. And, it might have been even later than that. And the only reason I bought the first one is because I had money to burn in a hole in my pocket at a gun show. and I found one for a great price, and I bought a 23, so that was my first 40, and my first Glock, and it was all uphill from there.
Around what year was that?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember it now. I'd have to think about it a little bit more, but it had to be. It was probably still during the ban, and I remember it was going for cheap for whatever reason. It was an old Gen 2, and really, like I say, I just was gonna mock it. I didn't think I would like it. I hated the looks of it. I always hated the gun, but it was may have been even the first time I actually picked one up and actually took a look at one more than just quickly at a store. In fact, I don't even know if I ever really accepted to pick one up and just feel one. I don't think I went into gun stores and ever asked to look at a Glock. So that might have been the first time I actually spent more than just a moment or two with one. And it started growing on me almost immediately. You think plastic. I think by now everyone's felt one, so they know how strong it is. But when you think plastic, you think BB gun or squirt gun, where it's real brittle and easy to break. Obviously, that's not the case with the polymers they use. So immediately it started growing on me, and I started gaining more and more respect for it as I started trying to make it break. Back then we didn't have videos or anything. We just would go to the range and shoot, and it didn't fail or anything. It didn't. I don't mean like reliability, because we didn't really care about that so much either. We just, it didn't have poor accuracy. It didn't have a horrible trigger. It wasn't, as bad as I could imagine it could have been. And because it was okay, I started shooting it more and more. And then when I actually finally did carry, all of its other features, all of its other characteristics appealed to me more and more and more, until it finally took its place as being the ultimate carry firearm for the most part, in my mind.
So initially the price, and somewhat of the intrigue for the new model type brought you in, but the reliability overall and the good, not necessarily great, at any one thing, but the good at everything is what kept you on board. Is that?
Well, I don't know if I said that right, but I said it kind of long. But I'd say that the only reason I even bought it was because I have a love of firearms and I'll buy weird guns. And I felt, at the time, the money I spent on it, which was very little, was, at the time, at least for me, very little, was basically an experiment. I'll play with this gun. If I don't like it, I'll get rid of it. If I like it, great. It'll, be safe, and it'll be a gun I take to the range. But I wasn't buying firearms for carry back then. And, again, it was just more my interest in the new type of firearm and the lack of anything else that struck my fancy at that particular gun show. I wasn't really, looking for anything in particular. So, it was just a happenstance that it just happened to be such a good price that I felt, okay, even if I hate this gun, I can still turn it around and sell it for a profit. So, and then I would say it's more of my growth as a shooter and my requirements as an eventual carrier, CCW, that I appreciated its characteristics. Before that, I could care less about its characteristics. It was just another of my firearms. I, at the time, had a few types of firearms, and it was just the one that didn't have the hammer, and it was the one that was made out of plastic. And I would take it to the range or the the shooting for the weekend or something, and the guys would go, oh, that's a Glock. Okay, let me try it. Okay, and then we'd put it back down on the tailgate and shoot something else that we were more interested in. But as my interest in carrying became more of a dictator of what I'm going to carry than my just preference, that's where it won out.
Gotcha. What about you, Stone Guy?
Well, I'm not quite as old as G-Web, so I was a little more receptive to the new age firearm, so to speak. And I want to say my first introduction to Glock had to just be from some law enforcement buddies that were already on the department. That was, standard issue. And at first I didn't like it because they had kind of small hands, and the grips felt a little fat for me compared to a 1911 or other handguns that I'd shot and carried. But once you're forced to carry something, you get used to training with it and manipulating it, and so you kind of, in a way, I guess you could say I was forced to like it. But Oh, did we
Well, you were
lose?
forced to. Yeah, but I think he'll come back. You were forced to use it or forced to like it?
Well, that's a better way to say it. Forced to use it and grew to like it.
Because I've
I
heard of
guess
that
is a
story
better way.
from other guys too. That well, that you just said. So
Yeah, forced to use it and grew to like it. That was the main thing. But I tell you one thing, because the the and I can't remember if it was a video or if it was just in the verbal propaganda illustrated by department heads. But there was a guy that I guess was pitching the contract for Glock, and he drove into the range with a Glock dragging behind his vehicle. Like had a Glock tied to the back of his car as he drove in to give the test. And then they did the, in
talking
the
about Eric.
mud, freezing in the ice, and I can't remember the guy that actually pitched it to the big to get the contract for most law enforcement agencies.
Oh, okay. Because
I
I
was
know a
under.
guy that did that for his podcast a while back.
Oh, you talking about Iraq vet?
No, a guy named
Oh.
Eric. He did it for the when the Gun Rights Radio Network was still on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can't remember. Obviously, it wasn't for every law enforcement agency across America, but it was for one that was going to land, like 4 or 5 department contracts, and so that was always a big thing, to get people to stand behind, and for people that weren't familiar with the reliability and the durability of that firearm, that was always something told to us: is, look, this gun's been put through this torture test, and this is why we chose it. This is why you can depend, you can stake your life on it, kind of thing. So I always thought that was kind of cool because I'd never heard of another firearm manufacturer putting their gun through that rigorous of a torture test to prove it.
I think it definitely was a game changer. It brought them to that level where they had to start thinking about making their guns that strong.
Yeah, do you guys think? I see a lot of the things that they've changed for the American market. They definitely. I don't think. I mean, whenever they designed the Glock, they certainly didn't have the American market in mind. So it's interesting to see the evolution, the way Americans, demand for certain things, and Glocks accommodate on certain things and not on others, which is interesting as well. But I think reliability is just inherent in the simplicity of the design. So, they've always had that going for them. Per se, I don't think that's an American trait, in and of itself. So, I like to hear what. Good.
I was gonna say the high points are fairly few parts, and the older Ring of Fire guns, the Jennings and the Ravens and stuff, they had few parts too. But again, the Glock just went, with the quality of the materials and I guess the preciseness, or at least the forethought of the engineering, brought it to a different level. Well, just obviously before anybody else did.
Well, was Glock before High Point?
Oh yeah, definitely. Glock is like what, 81 or something, and
Right.
I don't know when High Point came up, but I'm sure it was more recent than that.
For sure. So they're a different design, as well. One's a blowback.
Different design for sure, but I'm just saying, few parts doesn't mean just because you make a gun out of few parts. They still definitely had some magic there as far as, I don't know if I think it's the materials, because he put enough stuff into the plastic that the metal didn't need to be more than just strong sheets of metal. Nothing really had to be milled except for the slide.
It's definitely been revolutionary there. So I'd like to hear what, introduced you and then what kept you, because it's easy enough. I've certainly gone through enough guns that I thought were a good idea until I shot them, and they didn't work out for me for one reason or the other. So it's interesting to hear, what brought you on board and then what kept you, going through there. So take a look here at other topics a little disjointed, unless anyone else has something to add on why they stick with Glock.
Well, for me, I owned the thing, and then when I started getting into doing, honestly, what happened is I started carrying and doing the gun websites full time, coming from doing hunting and fishing type of websites pretty much full time. But it was sort of like went from working for clients to working for myself was the first step, and then even with I'm trying to say without a net, and then the going to guns only was like another leap without the net. But so when I first started getting into that stuff, it was with both feet. I jumped in. So I started carrying, started doing reviews of classes, and going to all kinds of different types of firearms classes. Anything I could get my hands on or get invited to, I went to. And as I started to carry, I carried around my HK because it's a better gun. It's more expensive, and it's legit, and it's got some reputation and time on the clock, in other words. And then I started going to these classes and seeing everybody else was in the same kind of boat. Glock had decades of reliability, but it was almost forced reliability. Like some guy said, you didn't really have a lot of choice when you went into a department. You were issued a Glock a lot of times, so you carried a Glock. And that alone wasn't enough to sway everybody immediately. So it took a long time before basically everyone. And I think this was parallel to not necessarily everybody out there, but a lot of people out there were kind of awakening to, oh, I can carry in my state, and oh, I can do more than just the CCW class if I want to. I can go take a defensive or a pistol class or a carving class or whatever kind of firearms class. So people started doing that. People started or continued to do the competition shooting. And I didn't pay too much attention to the competition side, except I'd hear about the competition side from the training angle. And as I experienced all these different training classes and saw just every other type of pistol fail, every other type of pistol. And let's say your pistol fails and it's, before noon on the first day of your class, or maybe it's, sometime where you still have the potential to run out to a store and get a part. You can't just run to the store and get parts for a CZ or something. So you can a lot of times run to the store and get a replacement part for a Glock. Just the first gun store is probably going to have what you need. So that kind of stuff really impressed me. And then as I started to carry the HK a lot, thinking about how much that HK cost and how much it was worth to me compared to my Glock, which I didn't care at all about, and I knew would at least work, I started thinking more, I guess, changing my own mind and became more reluctantly willing to carry around the tool of the Glock, and then appreciate my other firearms for what they were, but kind of retire them to the not, you don't need to be carried around every day HK. I'll let the Glock do that for you because I know it'll work, and then I'll take my HK to the range and have fun with that one. It'll be my recreational gun. So that's sort of why I kept with them and then eventually started carrying them. And then the more you reinforce the concept that the Glock's always going to work, and that, well, if I already got a 23, then if I get a 22, it's the same gun, and I can literally use all the 22 mags in the 23. So, that was an easy purchase. And then, well, if I've got both of them, I might as well get the subcompacts, and now you have a 27, same situation. You can still use the same holsters and stuff. So economics-wise, if you're going to get a couple of firearms, why not get a firearm that's going to use the same holster, light, magazines, any kind of upgrades you do. If you're going to put a specific kind of sight on it, you're going to be able to put it on all your Glocks.
Right, and while I'll be the first to point out that Glock isn't the only one that does that, they were certainly the first. So.
Oh, they were only one at the time. Exactly. Yeah, they're not exactly the same anymore. It's not the same situation, but yeah, that's a good point.
Right. So I have XTs, MPs, and you can say, oh, my MP and my XT does that, but they haven't done it for the period of time. Therefore, there aren't that many magazines. I mean, it's the numbers game, really. For availability of magazines, Glock is always going to win out. Because they've had the amount of time to build those magazines. Even the cheap Korean mags that I don't use, they're still out there. I don't really know too many, knockoff MMP mags or even XT mags right now. So I know there's Beretta and probably CZ, but comparing the the most common three that people compare to Glock. That being M&P and XD. So definitely a big a big bonus for a Glock there. Stone, was there one thing that kind of kept you sticking with Glock? Because you were forced on you, but what really kept you there?
Yeah, honestly, after the fact, it was just that reliability. Never having an issue. Every time we shot and qualified, and I mean, just every time I went to the range, just never having an issue. Once you kind of build that relationship with your firearm, it's hard to, it's almost like a woman. It's hard to cheat on, when they've been that good to you.
Right on. So for me, I started out I had shot Glocks, but I was always of the crowd, like grip angle's wrong. I shoot 1911 better. In reality, because it's a single action. Therefore, my poor trigger control is masked by, an easier to trip trigger. So, naturally I wanted XDs whenever I was really buying a bunch of guns, and that's what I bought, and they ran okay. They weren't really the best, although they were the best that I was aware of. And, I was shooting with some cop buddies of mine. I said, just let me see. He was out shooting me is what it was. And the XD I was shooting had a good trigger in it, aftermarket, Powder River Precision, a bunch of stuff done to it. And it shot good, but this dude was out shooting me, and he was a good shooter, but I grabbed his gun and I shot it better than my XD. I mean, I'd been shooting all day. There wasn't any question about it. I could shoot him back to back, and I thought, why am I fighting this? There's no, I could, shake my fist at whoever, but I shoot one gun better. Why wouldn't I shoot that gun all the time? And I basically sold the majority of my other guns, XDs and stuff, and slowly bought Glocks over time. So the reliability aspect and everything else I knew was always there. I always thought differently for the XDs, but in reality they have roll pins, and this was sort of before the M&Ps were really coming to fruition, so I'd already made the switch to Glock by the time they started to become popular, the M&P, so I never really gave them a second thought, although I certainly own them and have owned more of them. But the more that I work on them, the more that I use them, the more that I realize that roll pins really don't belong in a gun nowadays. And if I can't take it apart with one punch, why would I try to fight anything else? Because combat accuracy is there, for the majority of the guns that you're going to use. So I don't know. Why try to overthink it? Then you look at all the competition shooters. What do they shoot? Most of IPSC and IDPA put out their equipment surveys, so you can view what everyone shoots every year, percentage-wise, and they're all Glocks. So.
Yep. Yeah, if they're not race guns, they're Glocks.
Right.
And hell, now there's even some race gun. Some Glocks that are turned into race guns with.
So, and that's not to say that other models aren't making their way up. We're starting to take more market share, but still, Glock's a dominant manufacturer in those areas, and there's no one who can tell me that these competition shooters all happen to have some weird wrist thing where, they can only shoot Glocks. When these guys who say that their grip angle doesn't fit them, it just doesn't really sit, with me, because all these competition guys shoot this grip angle and they shoot it better than any other gun. So it's kind of a moot point whenever someone says that to me. So.
Yeah, it's just a matter of training with it, because I will tell you, when I go straight from, like there's been times where I've shot a standard, I'll shoot limited with my Glock, and then it's a classifier day or something, so I'll switch over and I'll shoot single stack to get classified in that. And going straight from shooting the Glock to a 1911, my 1911 shots are always low.
Sure.
You know, so it's definitely a different grip angle, but it's something that you can easily adapt to and train for.
Any good shooter is going to align his sights, before he pulls that trigger. So, right, the first couple times, to me, you're going to notice it. Maybe, I gotta push this front sight down. Coming onto the Glock after I was shooting my 1911 forever. But to me, that's just a part of breaking a shot, right? Is getting you may notice it a little bit more because you were doing, whatever all day, but at the same time, it just takes that small. And in a critical situation, it's not like you were shooting your 1911 all day and then you put your Glock on, and then on the way home, it took you that half second to align your shots, and that was the end. Like, that's not, to me, that's not really realistic. So, I don't know. It's interesting. So let's see. Do you have another topic you want to cover right now, or?
I was going to say the elephant in the room there that we never talk about with the M&P is that it's not even, at this point, it's not even a rumor. It's known that Smith & Wesson made the what was it, the
SV
Sigma.
The Sigma, yeah, thanks. The Sigma was literally like a copy. They got sued, and then came the M&P. So even when the M&P first hit the market, nobody, that was like, Car Wolf type of thing. It's like, come on, Smith, again, really? Like, so you went in there and changed a couple of things so you don't get sued this time, but they didn't. They had to earn what they've got now. And they have, but that's one of the reasons why you were mentioning, or I put that in there when you were talking about going from, or making the decision between Glock and then soon after M&Ps. People weren't about to say, I've only got 2 Glocks, I might as well scrap them and start jumping on the M&P bandwagon. Because, that was a totally new, but well-beaten path from Smith. So, I don't know if that's been brought up before when we've talked about that concept.
No, I mean, just to cover that, at least as far as my experience and knowledge, there is, they definitely came out with the Sigma, which was, if you read the book on Glock, they certainly quote people inside there saying basically copy it. They were certainly sued and lost for it. I think they paid a penalty. I think there's a common rumor that they have to pay some type of royalty on every gun, but I don't think that was the...
well, hell, the Glock slide would fit on the Sigma frame.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. Actually, now that you say that, I think I had seen pictures of it.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. So whenever the M&P came out, I'm like, okay, improved Sigma. Like, still not interested in you.
Exactly. Exactly. Like the non-lawsuit version of the Sigma.
Right. Oh, you got some fancy serrations. That's pretty. Still got.
And then, to be honest, since we can freely bash Smith in here, it's not like they're sponsoring this Glock chat anytime soon. They have more parts, and what's the first thing anyone ever says when you say, I'm going to buy a Smith & Wesson M&P?
Switch the trigger.
Yeah, go out and buy that $80 trigger and then a reset kit if you want to make it more like a Glock. So, that's an interesting, or it's definitely an alternative to it, but I wouldn't say that it's a realistic alternative for law enforcement and stuff like that. At least the way it stands right now.
No, it's right, because if you want to talk about fleet ownership, or department-wide ownership or agency buys and things like that, anything with more, parts is not necessarily a good scenario. You're already starting, from the the downside of that argument for sure. There are certainly companies that use it. It seems to be, been out there for a while to be relatively reliable. The problem I have is I bought a Pro Series, what they would call their Pro Series, which I haven't known Glock to do. I don't know that they've made a professional. They make competition guns. They're not really. They don't say competition on the side, right? I mean, they're not. This isn't like the best trigger they're supposed to have.
And they share internal parts. Yeah, they're not. Well, they do put a different trigger in, but it's still a standard Glock trigger. It's not a, it's not a.
Right.
I'm trying to say custom shop build or anything.
Right. It was ridiculous. The Pro Core that I bought, the trigger was terrible, and I bought I did the whole rigmarole aftermarket trigger and all that stuff, but just out of the box. And you can walk through any store basically and pick up any M&P and just feel its gritty take up, because of the safety plunger spring being it's all ridiculous. I can't even believe they put out a gun like that nowadays, but they do, and they sell a bunch of them because they're not Glocks apparently, or they have a safety, I guess, which is important to some people. So I guess that'll take us to another segment that I'd like to do every show, and that's Glock versus. So I don't know if I'll have someone on that wants to defend their favorite gun or whatever. And this is just meant to be a debate back and forth, points, counterpoint kind of thing. And that's to take whatever the gun du jour is and compare it to, its counterpart in Glock and see whether it really wins out.
Well, is there another gun on the market that has had as much proven, I guess, I don't want to say combat proven, but as much.
You could say time on the clock, though, and I think that time spent in a holster is still as valuable as far as time being used, because if it can't sit in a holster and be safe and good to go, then it's not a worthwhile option.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Time in a holster. I just don't know of any other firearm out there that's been as widely dispensed, issued.
Well, bred in '92.
Well, yeah, but now I could.
Well, yeah, but that's it. Bred in '92, 1911. What else is there? So
yeah, and the bred in
revolvers.
Well, and then the bred in '92, I can. Every time I talk to anybody from the Army, they fucking hate those things. They say they're pieces of shit. They don't work. Their magazines suck, and they're constantly failing in the field. So I don't know.
Great.
They look awesome. I mean, I always wanted one, but
So you want to look at them from a historical type perspective, because that's cool. I'm up for whatever interpretation of this. So. Well,
that would be a good. I don't think it'd be hard to argue the 1911, because the original loose tolerant 1911 that got us through many wars, and really no one talked shit about those because they were fantastic guns. But now the
Beretta a lot either. Let's be clear. That was really the secondary gun. It's not like they were storming Normandy with their 1911.
I hear you, but you didn't get at the end of World War II. It wasn't like all the vets were coming back and throwing
complaining about it.
Right. They weren't. Yeah. Whereas the Beretta 92, I get constant complaints about those. So I think that'd be a good one to say Glock versus Beretta 92.
All right, I'm up for that debate. Certainly. So let's talk about.
Can I quickly go back to the last piece for a second before we jump into this one?
Yeah.
Because somebody made a good point, and I don't know what the name is. I guess all 9 yards. So all 9 yards saying that, and nobody buys the 3.5 pound trigger for a Glock, and that's true. A lot of people do change their trigger out, but what's a 3.5 pound disconnect cost? Like $15?
If that, yeah, the connector, yeah.
Compared to and most places, if you're not comfortable swapping it out, most places that sell it to you are going to have a Glock armor. Again, another advantage. There are Smith & Wesson armorers, but there are SIG armorers, and there's Colt armorers, but not for 1911s that I'm aware of. And almost anybody can be a Glock armorer. But anyway, if you buy something from a store, more than likely they're going to have a Glock armor, or somebody's able to do that. Well, you want to have a Glock armor do that. Anyway, you can have it installed with not voiding your warranty that way for what, $20? And the thing we're talking about from Smith & Wesson is an $80-something kit, and you're going to have to either take it to just any old gunsmith, or like I say, try finding a Smith & Wesson armor. I only know of 2 in Tucson.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you generally the I can't even think of the name of the trigger that replaces it. What's the
Apex?
Apex trigger, yeah. So that's the whole trigger. Like you remove the whole trigger.
Well, there's
It's a bunch
there's
of weird
different
parts, but
yeah, there's different components. So you can get a solid face trigger, either aluminum or polymer for the M&Ps.
Right.
That
Yeah, that's what
doesn't
I was.
change the actual trigger weight.
Oh, see, I thought that was all part of that Apex kit. Was the
No, you
actual.
can buy it all as one piece, which is what I did, and that runs you like $140 or $130 or something like that. But it just makes it a solid rather than a two-piece piece of garbage MP trigger that feels like it's going to snap off.
All right.
Right. But that doesn't change the trigger weight. There's other springs and a different sear and things like that that go in the Apex kit that I put in. And I can tell you it takes way longer and more parts than changing anything out in your Glock. So
Yeah, and see, I got suckered into the M&P too. I mean, I bought a range kit because it had the 3 magazines and a blue loader and the Blade Tech holsters, and I mean it was a good deal. I think I paid $500 for the whole thing, and
I think it's a good deal too for what it is.
yeah, I mean for what it is, but I quickly reserved that pistol to be a range gun. You know, because of that trigger, because of it didn't have the history behind it, the proven reliability. I think it's a good, I think it's a good gun. I got the full size 9mm. But I wouldn't trust it to run it in competition. I wouldn't carry it. And the biggest thing is that trigger, because it's like a funky. It's like the trigger broke and they pinned it back together. That's how I can explain it. It's fucking weird feeling.
right.
It's a weird feeling trigger.
Yeah, the ones I shot too had a different style take up and then wall and not really discernible break between any of them. And then the reset was difficult to manage and to know where it was going to reset. So you could learn to run it fast. So it didn't. Now after the Apex kit, it felt better. It certainly felt better, but then it didn't feel like defensive.
Right.
It felt like a polymer 1911 style trigger. It was definitely between the two, like short take up, pretty crisp break, next to no over travel, relatively good reset kind of thing, but it wasn't not something I'd want to carry probably.
Right. Well, and then
shoot
again,
under stress.
you're talking about spending $140. I mean, you're a quarter of the price of the gun for just to fix something that should be really mandatory, you would think, by the factory.
I mean, the guys that I know that shoot them will say that, a couple hundred rounds, 200-300, you kind of break some of that in, that the tolerances are such that, it takes a little bit of break-in to smooth that stuff out. I wouldn't want to buy a gun that I would either, because then that's the same amount of money, whether you want to put a trigger kit into it or you want to waste ammo just to where the trigger feels better. To me, so whenever you're looking at buying an M&P, you have to add on that 80 to 100 and whatever dollars to whether it's going to be an ammo break-in or whether it's going to be in versus buying a Glock and $15 connector or whatever that you can change out and with a punch you probably have laying around the house. So.
Well, and name another gun that you can really at this point just buy and take to the range and start shooting it. You literally don't have to do anything. I mean, you could check it to double check, but it's not required to go in and oil it and everything. So that was a game changer again, I think. People were expected to buy a gun and then shoot it for a while before they had it working the way they wanted.
I'd say it's probably the only gun that I would consistently buy and I could put in a holster and carry home and know that it's going to shoot. I couldn't say that for another manufacturer personally. So, for whatever that's worth.
But you're saying it has the potential, not you encourage children to go out and buy guns and take them home.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Sorry to get us off track there. I know we were about to hate the Beretta, and I don't want to miss an opportunity to hate on Beretta.
All right. So originally I was looking at this more as like certain models versus like say shield, the new shield with no safety versus whatever Glock has. So let's just look at the Glock versus the Beretta 92. Whether it's capacity, kind of weight to some degree. I don't necessarily want to dive into the tech specs. Right now I think we've all shot both of those guns. For the most part. So what's comparable? 17 versus the 92. So 17 is definitely lighter than the 92. They have a different operating mechanism, right?
Well, you mean as far as the Beretta's, most of the time it's single action, double action, or it's double action, single action, and sometimes it's double action only, but otherwise it's got a hammer for the most part, where the Glock is the safe action.
Let's explore all the differences. So the majority of the Berettas we're going to discuss are military issue or police issue. What's the majority that are out there, which are probably DASA guns, right?
Yeah,
for sure, especially when you're talking military one.
Right.
And then they put their selector, their safety selector decocker thingy up on the slide. Brilliant.
The bat wings, right?
Makes it flip into safety every time you try to rack the slide, and you have to rack the slide in the back of the slide because they conveniently scallop the whole front of the slide out of there so that you can get debris and dust and lint and fluids in there.
Fixed barrel, blowback design, versus so the front of a 92, if anyone looks at it, especially over in your sandy conditions, can all collect dust and dirt and rocks and shit in it, versus the Glock's closed design, lock breech, lock and breech, setup over there. So beyond
but the
that,
Beretta makes up for its ability to get dirt and stuff in the receiver or into the slide by making the receiver out of metal and making it much heavier. So that way it counteracts the tendency to be prone to malfunction.
Yeah, right. So that's what's capacity on both? I'm trying to think. What's the max?
17 on the Glock 17, right?
Right. Do they make 19 round 92 mags? I don't think. I'm trying to think of the ones I have laying around. I don't remember now.
I think they were 15 originally.
Probably. 92. It's significantly heavier. And I know some of the earlier ones had the slides flying off the front of them. Seals didn't like them.
There's always that the stigma that it had that you could reach up and grab the slide off with one hand.
Yep, it's not a stigma. It's fact.
Yeah.
Plenty of evidence out there. And I will give it to them that it's easier to take apart. But yeah, if it gets so easy to take apart that your adversary can do it in the midst of your fight, then that's ridiculous.
I think 15 might have been standard and 17 might be.
We're looking at the characteristic differences between them. I like to look at the history, I guess, or the bigger picture. And the 92 is really just a Beretta. I mean, Berettas have been around for a long time. It's I'll give them credit for being one of the oldest. I think it's one of the oldest businesses on the planet. It's definitely the oldest, if not the oldest, one of the oldest gun manufacturers, because they used to build cannons and stuff, barrels back in the day, or something. But that design ain't new. That design's from the early 1900s, right, when they were copying off of Browning. I'm assuming back in the day. And what the 92 probably means, well, I don't know what the 92 means because I think it was invented in the 70s. But again, it's just a swelled up version of a little 380 or whatever the thing comes from. I don't know enough about Berettas to know, but I suspect that since I've seen so many similar Berettas that are older than it, that it's really just their same design getting souped up and souped down, and then whatever minor tweaks need to happen for the characteristics of the ammunition it's going to shoot as far as mag capacity and then spring tensions and the size and shape of things are going to be determined by how much power the ammo has. But that gun was basically, in other words, let's figure, it's that mentality of let's know, or this is what we can do, now let's make another product. Or maybe there's, the trends or demands are changing. Knowing what we or knowing what we know how to do or whatever. Let's just use the same factory we have here and make what people want. Make a version of what we have that's more towards what the people want. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that in comparison to the Glock, where Glock's, I don't know if it's totally unique, but it's definitely unique in this modern sense that the guy sat down in his basement. Well, he went and talked to a bunch of people who gave him the specifications of the perfect gun. Then he went down in his basement and designed what he considered to be the perfect solution to those requirements. And you can read the history of Glock to find out what those were. I forget who they were, some generals from Austria or something. So anyway, he went out, looked at what was available. Then he just started from the ground up doing what he knew to solve that problem. And then when he got the contract, he hadn't been a gun company, so that means he went out and bought the gun company, he got the contract, then that one bought the factory and built the factory around building his new thing, which was, I think, important because that means the gun was designed from your hand outward, not from what Beretta had been making in a 32 or 25 ACP, and then swelled it up into a 9mm, and here's what you get.
And what Gadsden Glock was a tool maker, right? He was not even a gunsmith originally, right?
Not a gunsmith. He was a plastic maker, so he made shower curtain rings and Glock knives, or knives for their military, and shovels and different things out of plastic. So he was familiar with the material that the Glock is made out of, and then how to get that material into shape. So the mold making. But right, not a gunsmith. That's why his take on it, good or bad, is unique, because he didn't really think about it a long time either. It was, depending on who you talk to, I think the book says it was developed between like 1 and 3 years at the most. So it wasn't like a lifelong passion of his. He wasn't like Browning, in other words, who thought about firearms his whole life and made millions of them. Glock has made however many versions of Glock there are. That's how many Glocks have happened, and I'm sure he only is fairly, kind of interested in the new ones. I doubt he does much more after he designed the first one, because they're all basically the same model, right?
Right.
I'm sure he has engineers just, change things around, but I imagine after the Glock 22 or so, he probably didn't have much hands-on anymore. He was more interested in the company.
Right. I would be.
But anyway, but I think that's important, because that's at least an important difference between these two, because even, not like the 1911 even, which was, again, like Browning was like, hey, Colt was like, we want this. Browning was like, I'm a genius, I'll make that. And then, it's the perfect mix. That Beretta, and I'm just picking on it because that's the one we happen to be picking on, there's other guns that have had the same situation, was kind of, again, just like, well, here's what we can piece together. Here's what we can do. So that's good enough. That'll solve the requirements. I think it's just, I think it's worth pointing out.
Yeah, for sure. So if we look at it from a versus perspective, the intended audience, police, military, which is the better solution, the Beretta 92 or the Glock 17? And I think it's pretty clear what the police have chosen.
We talked a lot about the operation there, but what we're talking about for people that might be unaware of what we're talking about as far as the types of double action, single action, or whatever, or striker fire, that Glock gives you the same exact trigger pull every time you pull the trigger. It's the first time you pull the trigger, the sixth or 17th time, it's exactly the same trigger pull with no other manipulations of your digits. No fingers have to touch anything except your one finger. You choose the finger, moves the trigger, then the bullet goes out. That's all there is on a Glock, very much like a revolver, where the Beretta in this case has, at least you have to remember that you're going to get a double action, a long, deliberate trigger pull, and then your next subsequent shot is going to be hair trigger all the way back. You just touch it and it goes off. And I think that's a lot to deal with for people that don't have mandatory up training, at regular periods of time. Not to mention the fact, like I said before, their safety decocker thing is up on the slide in a place where you have to interface with it with your other hand when you're cycling the gun, because the nature of the pistol requires you to cycle the slide, and because they took all the front of the slide off, it's forcing you. Like I say, it's a design from the 1900s that they evolved, and now in the, and like you said, firearms were the sidearms. Now it's, not always the sidearm when we're carrying it as our CCW gun. It's our primary firearm, and now we have to manipulate it with our fingers instead of our mitts, because we were afraid they're going to turn the gun in, put the gun on safe as soon as you cycle it.
Well, do you think? I've asked this question to a couple people, and I always get the same. They're like, "Well, because Glocks aren't made in the U.S." Well, they are now, but
Only some are.
I've always wondered why they never chose Glock as a standard issue for military. And Berettas are made in Italy, right? And their initial.
Right.
So I mean, they can't. That doesn't make any sense when they say it's because Berettas are foreign guns too.
No, it has to do with when you put up a firearms for trials with the U.S. military. The military is going to say, "Thank you, like Armalite, we really like your rifle, and now who wants to make it?" And they're going to get a show of hands, and they're going to say, "Who wants to do it for the least amount of money?" Okay, Colt, why don't you take this gun and start making it? So Gadsden Glock just got done building his firearm for the Austrian army. He was talked into bringing it over here to our commercial market, and I guess that was right around the time of the trials, but he was not about to just give away his patent to whoever gun company fill in the blank that was going to do it for the lowest bid. In other words, you'd have to give your patent to the U.S. government if you were going to win that trial or if you wanted to be involved in the trials.
Okay.
So if you're a Beretta and you just smashed a gun together, what do you care if you give them their patent? You'll just make another one.
Yeah, that makes sense then. So do you think we're ever going to see I mean, apparently they've already I don't know if they've actually voted on it, but they're in the process of looking for a gun to replace the Beretta 92. So I don't know what that's going to be.
I don't know. They've talked about that for a while. I don't think they've had their chance to do so. I don't know that it's ever going to happen, to be honest with you. All right. So, yeah, we'll move it along here. What else we got on our list here? So, model spotlight. I was going to cover the Glock 42 real quick. I just passed my 500 round mark on mine. Have you gotten to shoot one yet, Sunday?
Yeah. That's the 380 version,
Right.
the little 380 pocket pistol. I've shot one. Just I think maybe 2 magazines. I hadn't had real time to play with it. A couple buddies that own it they said they have issues with feeding, magazine extracting. So I mean, did you run into those same kind of issues or?
With certain ammo, the Privy Partisan or whatever, I did have a few issues with. I've also read that there have been some part updates for the magazine, maybe 1 or 2 other parts. So if anyone else is having issues, I'd recommend they call Glock and get the updated parts. I haven't done that. I've been running some better ammo through it and haven't had really that many issues. So yeah, on some of the lighter stuff, it seemed like I had some problems. But overall, I'm still amazed at how accurate I am with that gun at a relatively quick pace. So I don't know if you have the same experience or not, or compared it to other small 380s or what.
Oh yeah, as far as accuracy, because I carry a little Taurus TCP, and that's an accurate little gun for what it is. And same kind of deal with the Glock. I found that for a 1-inch barrel on a gun, that's still pretty accurate little gun.
Well, it can be if you do your part, that's for sure. Have you shot a Glock 42 yet?
Just like a magazine or so. So just to say I did, but I like it and I would get one, but I'll get one used at some point. I don't really want one. I don't like 380 anymore. At least I'm in a non-380 phase right now.
What was your impression of the gun, just in general?
I like it only because it's a tiny Glock. I don't know as far as the 380 against other 380s. I'd say it's got dovetailed removable sights. So it obviously at some point, because it's a Glock, somebody will make, or a lot of companies will make sights for it. So you'll have options there. Holds back on the last round, right? So it actually works like a real pistol instead of like most of the 380s. And for me, it was definitely small enough to fit in a pocket, I would think, even though it's a little bit bigger than some of the others. And the texture on the grip was pretty decent, I would think, for a pocket gun. I don't like how the Keltec is necessarily, and some of them are pretty smooth. So I like, it's pretty decent amount of aggressive texture or whatever, if I remember right. So and then what was it? They run about a little under a Glock, 4.5 or something.
Oh yeah, even less than that, under 4.
So I mean, are they that much better than a Keltec? No, I'm not getting rid of my Keltec. So the same reason I'm not getting rid of my Glocks to get Smith & Wessons, I'm not going to get rid of my Keltecs, which is my 380 pocket carry. If I'm going to do that anymore, I don't do that anymore. But or it's Taurus is even cheaper, I think, right? And
yeah, well, TCP was like 225, 200.
I have no idea. There's other ones out there now, but is the Glock worth twice as much? Probably still. I think those being able to put decent sights on one, sights that you can rack the slide on. A backup gun is by nature, like if your other gun's out of commission or you woke up with stars and running around because you got hit with a 2x4 and you're in a gunfight. I want that gun to be 100% advantage for me. And the Glock offers all of that. The only disadvantage at all is this price, and then I guess potentially the reliability issue that I've seen some guys have. I don't know nothing about that. I've only shot one mag out of it, or maybe a mag and a half. But so then there was also say you compare it to does the car even ever or the Kimber ever even make their little 380 version of the Solo? They had it shot one year, and we weren't supposed to talk about it because they said they weren't sure if they were going to produce it. But it's awesome. It's a little tiny Solo, but $700 or something. I mean, it's an insane price. And how much is the little car? 380, which is also fairly awesome. And it's a car, and so in other words, it's inferior to a Glock in my mind. And it costs 500 something, I think. So anyway, I think the Glock is a viable option for a 380. I just don't personally want it.
Well, think about the SIG, that little 1911 380 replica that SIG put out. It's fucking $600.
Oh, I don't consider those options because they're single action. I wouldn't carry a single action in my pocket, cocked and locked. It's insane. So unless you're looking for a tiny little gun to wear in your belt, like as a joke or something, I don't see the purpose of a 380 single action. But yeah, you're right. The prices definitely takes them out of the running as well. Unless you just don't care about money. A lot of people don't have the same, don't look at $600 the same way. If that looks like a $20 bill to you, then sure, grab a SIG.
Cool. So that's the update on the Glock 42. So yeah, the Privy, I had a handful of failure to extract or failure to go into a battery issues with, but I've been shooting gold dots pretty much exclusively since then, and we've all run pretty well. I'm trying to think if I had really one issue, and they're starting to have extra magazines out. Still not a lot of spare parts. I noticed Zev hasn't released any of their trigger stuff because they said they can't get spare parts yet for the 42. So at least you are able to get more magazines. They're starting to become more frequent. So let's take a look. That was our model spotlight deal of the week. To me, always trying to combat whenever people say they can't afford a Glock. J&G sales is pretty consistent for the consumer market to show good used Glocks. They're normally police trade-ins that are coming in here, and today I'm looking at some Glock 22s for Gen 3s for $330 in very good condition use. So that's a 40 cal. don't know that you're really going to find a better deal used consistently on any of the gun markets. Yeah, reliability, the commonality of parts, warranty that follows the gun. You can always send that gun back and have it refreshed if you think there's something wrong with it, even down to the magazine. So I don't know if anyone else has seen any good Glock deals this week, but that's the one that jumped to my mind.
Well, I did see that they're going to start making Glock factory threaded barrels. They're going to start offering threaded barrels from the factory, in other words, without some sort of special order, law enforcement thing.
I was going to say, they did do that before, right? But they just weren't that common, or?
Well, they've had them, but now they sent out a big flyer on that, where I got that picture of them disgracing the American flag, in my opinion. That's the same flyer where they talk about their new shirts, and the 42 and the 41, and then the Glock factory threaded barrels. Also, they say it for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, a commercial run of the Glock 17L. So I don't know what that means, because they've never given them to anybody else except the commercial market. But that was just a Glock thing, a Glock letter that came to a gun shop that let me look at the letter, and it was just like a little flyer that basically just said that they have a 41, they have a 42, threaded barrels, Glock 17L. We hate the American flag. We're going to put a picture of it on the shirt. It's all ripped up.
Nice. I don't know who was clamoring, though, for these.
17Ls. Everybody is cool.
I guess because you can't even run them in competition, right?
Competitions can't. They're too good for competition, you're right, but that doesn't mean you can't have your own private competitions. Maybe you're just trying to impress chicks, have a couple of 17Ls laying around. Works wonders.
I guess.
Plus, it's nice when everybody's like, oh, look, I've got an M&P compact here. You can be like, you call that a gun? Here's a gun. And you put down a 17L next to it.
Fucking Joker gun.
The L's do look funny, though, I gotta admit. I mean, I think the 34s and 35s are just about the perfect balance, but when you get out into those L's, even there's a 24L.
No, they don't bother with 24s. Are 40 calibers are more sophisticated, so we don't need the little L. We understand what 424 means, the long slide.
The 24 long, yeah, that thing is just funky looking. It's so damn long. It's disproportional at that point.
So 6 inches is too much for Stun Guy, I think is what he said. Yeah, what are you going to do if they start making 24 again?
I had a chance to buy one, and I didn't.
4, that'd be awesome. Green 24, Gen 4. Mm-hmm. That'd be a pretty nice gun.
Jolly Green Giant.
Well, the frame's the same, right? I mean, get any green frame. It's the slide is different. So the 17L is the deal of the week, I guess, for someone who has every other Glock and needs that. I just don't see who was crying for it, I guess. You can't run them in competition. So I guess it's really a novelty, and I'd rather have one of the original ones than a reproduction one.
Well, it's not a reproduction. It's just a limited run. They only do them occasionally. So I'm sure they just need to let people know they're coming so that people who thought they could never get one at least start asking the stores for them. But
I guess
it's not like they're adding it to their yearly production or anything. It's not like they're trying to force it on anybody.
But now, do you know whether or not they're going to charge a premium for this limited run?
Well, they're not cheap. They cost the most out of all the guns, I think. I'm not sure if the 41 costs more. It might.
At the time, the 41 had the highest of a catalog gun, but 17L wasn't even in last year's catalog. So.
Oh, well, maybe that's their thing. to let it go and then make a big announcement so they have something to talk about when they bring it back.
Yeah, well, how about you spend your time making a 9mm single stack? Sons of bitches.
Or carbine.
All right, let's take a look. I'll keep you guys up forever. Is there any questions in the chat? You guys see anything I'm going to cover? Take a look here.
Extendos. No, people just agreeing with us. The Glocks are some of the best made guns out there.
The greatest ever. That's understandable. All right, cool. All right, what else do we have to cover? Website spotlight. If anyone else has a website they found this week that they want to turn everyone else onto, mine's pretty straightforward. It's Glock.Guru. It's a site that I maintain from time to time, and someone was
Wait a
lucky.
minute. There's no .com on that?
Yeah, right. Someone was lucky enough to give me the .guru domain, so Glock.Guru is there, or the GlockGuru.com. So go ahead and check that out. There's some decent articles, a few links to buy some stuff, so go ahead and check that out. You guys have any websites you'd like to turn people on to?
I don't this time, but I'll have them in the future because I've seen some neat stuff for them. I'm trying to think. I'm going to just say check out I'll start with the Advantage Arms 22 conversion kits. Not that 22 ammo is plentiful, but some people still have some, and I have able to get it. And makes shooting a Glock a lot more fun if you can get twice the amount of time for very little extra money at the range.
I don't know. Stone, you find anything interesting?
No, I'm kind of like G-Webs. I'll do some more research. I'll just say Palmetto State. I always check Palmetto State out. They've got always have some good stuff going on.
I think they've got Glock mags at normal prices again. I don't know. I saw some guys pretty happy to see Glock.
I don't know. My Glock came with 2 magazines, so do I need more?
Of course. Need as many as you can afford.
You can only shoot one at a time. I mean,
yeah, there's only one hole in the gun, so I don't want to be greedy.
It seems a little excessive, if you ask me.
I mean, I got 4 pockets. I guess I could have 4. All right, well, I'm looking forward to the next show. Now I have an idea what you're going to have in mind for this, and I can, I'll start letting the gears turn on what to bring to the table next time.
That's cool. This is just kind of a trial run. We'll see if we get any feedback or whatnot about what people want to see. And then
I'd like to have maybe a segment on talking with the Glock deniers, and we could have somebody like Court come on, and we could try to convert them, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, maybe we can get some
like the psychology of a Glock hater.
Right. Well, someone who does like exorcisms as well at the same time.
That's a good idea.
These people seem to be possessed in the opposite way, of closed-minded rather than, looking at everything. It's a weird dynamic where they feel that we drink the Kool-Aid of there's nothing else out there. Whenever it's the haters that say that they don't make anything good, period, at all. It's an interesting dynamic. It certainly is. I'll have to get them on here. So we'll just wrap up here real quick. Run through, plug something if you want. I know we got Every Second Matters coming up real soon. So
yeah, tomorrow, huh? We got to talk to Bat and see if he'll run it.
Yep. You want to talk about that real quick and what you got going on then, Stone, and then we'll wrap up.
Oh, nothing, man. I don't really have anything going on right now.
Other than spreading propaganda about the UN.
That shit is blew up. It's crazy.
What are you going to do with all your UN money?
Buy a tinfoil hat.
Right on.
You should
So
park on that freeway like every week and take one a week.
I did another match down there this past weekend. I was hoping to see him again. I had my camera ready.
Much more efficient to just get a big UN stencil and some blue paint and then just start putting UN stencils on. Like, look, the UN has a water tower here in the U.S. Like, look, they've got a movie theater here in the U.S. What do they need this for? It's an indoctrination center. So I thought that maybe we could have Stone Guy, since he's so close in proximity to the factory, do an actual, like, try every week to try to get into the factory a different way. Like, okay, I'm climbing the fence now. The Glock Doberman is biting me. It's biting me again. I'm leaving. Or maybe a catapult up onto the roof down a skylight.
User submission. I think that's a good place for user submissions.
All right, so yeah, we have every Second Matters. We talk about Second Amendment stuff on the 2nd of every month, and we have a chat about it. So we'll be doing a chat tomorrow about the Second Amendment. There's all kinds of fun stuff to talk about there, I would think. And then I'll plug gunchat.net, which is, I don't know, if you typed in GlockGuru Podcast, you'll find it there. I'm sure you're going to run a player for the podcast over on GlockGuru. We'll put it on Gun Channels too, but Gun Chat is where all the other podcasts are. If you listen to this in the future as a podcast, we got all kinds of podcasts over there. Otherwise, Stitcher Radio. Otherwise, iTunes. Otherwise, Google. I guess type it in there and you'll find them.
Right on. So again, we're going to try to make this every couple weeks minimum. So go ahead and check back on the Stitcher station or on gunchannels.com. I'll try to get some different guests every week and take any kind of input you guys have. So feel free to submit that on Gun Channels. And if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I appreciate you guys coming in.
All right.
Thanks for letting us be on the first one. We'll be able to talk to our grandkids about this one.
Yeah. Nice.
All right, right on.